Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's FPC Radio Live. It is Thursday, January the 12th, 2023. We're just a couple days away from kickoff of Super Wildcard Weekend. We have Saturday games, Sunday games, and we top it all off with Buccaneers Cowboys on Monday night. So usually whenever we hit that Thursday, even with, maybe not so much during the regular season because I was actually always almost down on these Thursday night matchups. But at least this time of the year, once we hit that Thursday, I feel like we've turned the corner. We're heading full steam into these matchups, which I'm really, really excited for.
Yeah, it should be a good weekend of football. You've got three interdivisional matchups, right? Mm-hmm. So this will be the third time those teams meet. And as far as Thursday Night Football, you're not the only person that was disappointed in Thursday Night Football. The ratings were down 40% on Prime Network. So the NFL is probably not too pleased with that, but neither is Prime, which laid out over $1 billion a year for that package. And again, there weren't a lot of appealing games, and also older folks aren't streaming it. And as I said before, there weren't a lot of appealing games. In fact, the guy that was making $1 million a game to do play-by-play didn't seem all that invested either. Of course, we're talking about Al Michaels, but yeah, this should be a good weekend.
Yeah, and look, I mean, what do you expect when you get the package of games that you get? And look, mm-hmm. I think it's all understood that look, Monday Night Football, especially Sunday Night Football, is the marquee night. It's not so mm-hmm. much Monday; it's Sunday Night Football, and those are the games that are going to get the highest priority, and they get flexed and all that stuff. Obviously for obvious reasons, flexing games from Sunday afternoon into Sunday night's a lot easier than flexing it from Sunday to Thursday or Sunday to Monday, so on mm-hmm. and so forth. So, but yeah, anyway, it's been a fairly quick week in terms of just waiting for these games to come around. I mean, obviously the big news this week, and before we get into talking about the playoffs, we're going to talk about Sean Payton because there's no secret that he seem destined to return to coaching in the not so distant future. And that future may very well be in the next couple weeks because surprise, surprise, John, he's garnered a lot of interest from just about every team that's searching for a head coach right now.
Yeah, I mean, he's a top flight head coach. And I would just wonder if he's just going to wait to see what the best situation is for him. I would think Sean Payton, if he goes anywhere, is going to run the entire program. He did in New Orleans. He had Mickey Loomis as his general manager, but I think Sean Payton had final say over most roster decisions. I don't think he's going to go to a place where he has to answer to a general manager. So where that place is, maybe it's Denver, where, with new ownership, they can reboot the entire front office. I know he was going to interview with Houston. Is he going to answer to Nick Caserio, who's had back-to-back awful years as general manager? Probably not. Or Sean Payton's still a young enough guy. He's roughly my age, so I like to say that he's a young guy, right? Because, 60 is not that old. He's turning 60 this year.
It's the new 40, John.
It is, absolutely. I mean, I actually feel better, other than my eyes, at 60 than I did at 40. I'm like 40 pounds lighter. But I think maybe he can even wait another year and pick a better situation, because are there really any great situations that are available right now? First of all, I thought there'd be more firings on Black Monday, and there weren't. So some of the vacancies are like, Carolina, Denver, maybe Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Not a lot of really appealing places.
I guess you can say, but they all come with caveats, obviously. Like, because you look at Houston, you're like, well, Houston has 2 first-round picks the next couple of years. They have a lot of cap space, and he could pick his own quarterback. However, do you really want to deal with that ownership situation? Right. And that's enough to have you turn your nose and walk away from that. Look, I think we've been talking about it for a very, very long time. The Chargers, that's the perfect situation for him. Yep. Like, I don't want to go to Denver and deal with Russell Wilson. Like, it's not right. A matter. You know what I mean? I don't want that. I don't want to be saddled with a quarterback that I may, get into camp and have one of those classic, Arrested Development cut scenes where they're like, I think I've made a huge mistake. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't want to do that. And look, maybe Denver can turn it around and do some nice things with Russell Wilson. They certainly ended on a high note's relative, because pretty much the entire season was a low note for Denver. So, but from Sean Payton's standpoint, I'm not looking at that as an appealing situation. Indianapolis, again, who's going to play quarterback? I mean, this obviously would give him an opportunity to pick his own quarterback, but they have a lot of other issues. Uh, what other Miami? I doubt it again because I don't see them moving on from Mike McDaniel this early. Like after 1 year, I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't know, John. I mean, again, the Chargers seem like the right situation, the best situation. But I said it last week. I'll keep saying it, and I'll say it even if they win this weekend. They need to fire Brandon Staley. And unfortunately for them, if they do win this weekend, I think it buys him a longer leash, and it probably shouldn't.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if they can beat Jacksonville, get to the divisional round, then if you're Brandon Staley or whoever, you can make a case. Well, we got to the divisional round and we lost to the Chiefs or whatever, or Buffalo or Cincinnati, whoever they might play in the divisional round. So that's something that they can deal with. It's a notoriously cheap franchise. I mean, they still own the NFL $750 million for the relocation fee, and I don't think they've started to attack that yet. So I don't think they want to be paying a coach that's no longer coaching. Although I don't think Brandon Staley was a major signing. It's not like they went out and offered him, $100 million for 10 years, like John Gruden got from the Raiders. Yeah, that to me would be the perfect situation. You get your ready-made quarterback. Although some of these coaches, not some of these coaches, most of these coaches have massive egos. I'm sure Sean Payton thinks he could go to Denver and fix Russell Wilson, right? I mean, that's the way these guys are wired. So maybe that is an appealing place. You've got endless amount of money with the Walton family now owning the Broncos, so that could be a place to go. There's no real appealing place where you say, "Oh, this is a really good job." I mean, like 3 years ago when Matt LaFleur went to Green Bay, that was a plum job. First of all, it's the Green Bay Packers. Second of all, you had a great quarterback, right? So, great place to go, and he wins 13 games 3 consecutive years. It fails in the playoffs, obviously, but that was a plum job. That's something that Sean Payton probably would like to do because again, you want to go in there and do a total rebuild. That's not that easy. But Houston does have the second overall pick in the draft, and C.J. Stroud from Ohio State, Bryce Young from Alabama. They could end up with one of those two guys if Sean Payton's high on them. Maybe that's a good building block.
Yeah, and look, I mean, again, the biggest, looking at it from a opportunity to build standpoint, yeah, I mean, Houston seems like a really good destination because there's a lot of room to work there. But again, the ownership and the situation there is enough, I think, to make Sean Payton pause for concern. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, I think that the ego is the reason why he is going to end up coming back this year, regardless of where he ends up. It might not be the most ideal situation, but we don't know what's going to happen between now and then. I mean, maybe the Chargers lose this weekend and then Brandon Staley gets fired. Then all of a sudden we're like, well, there you go. I mean, there's no more ideal situation than that when you're looking at, well, you have a quarterback, you have talent. It seems like the right move for him. But then again, maybe another situation opens up. I mean, what's happening with Sean McVay? Is he just going back and forth? Is he going to walk away? I don't know. Maybe that's a decision they decide to move on from. Like I said, don't even roll out Miami. Who knows? Maybe they get blown out this weekend, and that's a very big possibility considering they're on their third string quarterback.
They already paid for Sean Payton. I mean, they may have to pay again because they were fined a first round pick, right? Because of the tampering with Payton and Brady. And if they've already paid that, why not go ahead and go full bore with Payton?
Yeah, at least get something in return, I guess, right?
Eventually. Why not, right? Go full heel.
Look,
so let's do it.
I've already, looked at it and said, I don't, earlier in the season, we kind of dismissed the Dolphins as a potential landing spot for Brady because, hey, Tua started to play well and, they were winning games under Tua and they are a better team with Tua. But if you're the Dolphins and you haven't won a Super Bowl in 50 years, okay? Or whatever, 1972, what's the math there?
That's 50 years. No, it's been 50 years.
Yeah, right.
Ian, they haven't been in a Super Bowl in 38 years.
Yeah. I mean, unless you want to count the
was the last time.
Well, I was going to say, unless you want to count the fictitious one from the original Ace Ventura, where the Dolphins played the Eagles, and at that point in time, it was a mystery who won. The Eagles had never won a Super Bowl at that point, and to your point, Dan Marino, like that was That was his quote unquote second Super Bowl. But yeah, if you're the Dolphins and you have Tyreek Hill, you have Jalen Waddle, you have this offensive talent, and you have an opportunity to go out and get Tom Brady again, who can clearly still play. Anyone who says he can't is just kind of being a hater or not really watching and paying attention more to the numbers. You put him in this offense with Hill and Waddle and all these other guys. Good luck. Good luck. You know what I mean? That's it's so that opens up the possibility. Maybe they do say, you know what? Getting Sean Payton is more valuable than keeping a potentially young, pretty good coach. And again, I think the jury's still out on Mike McDaniel. That obviously I'm always skeptical to start. But I think there is certainly, I don't think his stock is as high, let's say, as training camp when he was taking photos with all the media and they were loving him and everything like that. So,
5-game losing streak, does hit the coach, obviously, when you're 8-3 and then you're 8-8, and then you win 11-6 over the Jets in a slog to qualify for the playoffs, and you need a little bit of help too to get in.
And look, I mean, there were a lot of injuries. Obviously, were a big deal. How the whole Tua situation was handled earlier in the season is a huge knock. Apparently, the inability or unwillingness to really adjust offensively. Now, when you have Tom Brady under center, you can throw the ball every single play of the game and you'll be fine. With Tua, as good as he was and has been for much of the season, you just can't do that. There's not many quarterbacks you can put that much on their arm, no matter how good or great you think they are. So if you're Miami, maybe you're like, you know what? We got to swing for the fences. Because even in this stacked AFC, you add Tom Brady, potentially adding Sean Payton, all of a sudden you're right there on the same, like you skip that can they do it phase and you just enter that level of, okay, these are the AFC tier 1 teams.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Yeah, absolutely. They become immediate Super Bowl contenders with a lot, maybe 5 other teams in the AFC because they all have outstanding quarterbacks. I mean, the quarterback depth in the AFC is incredible already. Just get Brady from the NFC to the AFC would be kind of wild, and maybe Rodgers ends up in taking like every good quarterback to the AFC. Like the Pro Bowl NFC quarterbacks next year will be like Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, and Jalen Hurts, who I think is probably the best quarterback right now in the NFC anyway. But yeah, that'd be interesting. And I think Brady would love to play in Miami. I know he's got the big, beautiful home that's close by there. Old people like to be in Miami, right? Go to Florida. Hey, stay on the East Coast, close to his family, et cetera. And I know there's a connection with ownership there with Stephen Ross, and maybe down the road he buys into that franchise, 5, 10%, whatever it may be, and he goes on his merry way.
Yeah, look, that's certainly a possibility. And to be honest, I'm not even. I mean, at a certain point this season, I was really down on him returning to Tampa. I mean, I don't think it's been talked about enough. Maybe he just comes back to Tampa. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
I don't know if that means a change at head coach. I don't know if that means a kind of a revamping of their depth. They need more depth and they need to kind of get a little bit younger in certain situations. But I mean, look, I can see that too. You sign a 2-year deal, play 2 more years, gives, based on the fact that Blaine Gabbert came in to replace Tom Brady, I don't think they're that high on Kyle Trask. So the quarterback of the future is not on the roster. So it's not like it's Jordan Love and you could potentially have a guy that can be your next guy. Maybe he's not as good as the previous guy, but you know what I mean? At least there's that option. Like Blaine Gabbert's, outside of Brady, is considered old. I mean, he's like 36 years old. So he's not clearly the future. And the fact that they put him in over Kyle Trask in that mop-up, kind of a, forget the last game of the season type situation. So you mentioned John. Excuse me, my voice just cracked there. And
when you talk about Tom Brady, yeah. I get it.
I was going to say, in reality, though, Blaine Gabbert is a very, very young guy at 36, because we all know that 36 is very young.
I think I know someone who's 36. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I do too. It might be me.
Look in the mirror.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to frighten myself this early, but anyways, you mentioned best quarterbacks in the NFC, and I think this might be a appropriate time to maybe rank our best quarterbacks in the NFC playoffs. So no, sorry, John, no Aaron Rodgers. We can't fit him in this situation. I apologize. Um, so let's do it, and we'll start from 7 and work our way down. And this includes the Eagles. You know, we're not just going to do wild card. We're going to do the entire NFC playoffs as it starts. So. Number 7 for me, and I think we will probably be lockstep in this one, is Daniel Jones. No, look, I think he's been obviously part of why the Giants are obviously in this position. I think coaching obviously is a huge factor in all of this. But he's played better. He's played better. You look at his progression, so to speak, since he started and to where he is now. His turnover rate is much better, and on the level of a elite level quarterback. So, you know, at the end of the day, I think you can sit there and say, you know what, that's very important, and that makes for a very good quarterback. Just in this grand scheme of things, when you're talking about the landscape of the NFC, he's just going to be at the very bottom, and I don't think we're going to disagree.
We are going to disagree.
Oh, there we go. Good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes when you rate the quarterbacks, you also have to look at the supporting cast. And the guy I had at number 7 probably has the most talent of any quarterback in terms of his supporting cast, right? And I'm talking about Brock Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers. You got an elite offensive line, a great play caller in Kyle Shanahan. Also at the backs, Deebo Samuel's expected back, if not this week, in the divisional round. You've got George Kittle's one of the best tight ends, if not the best tight end in football. You got all sorts of skills around him. But again, he's only played, a half a dozen games, and he does seem limited, but he's doing a great job. But I put him at number 7 because Daniel Jones, to me at least, he can beat you with his legs. I mean, he had over 700 yards rushing. He's a dual threat quarterback. And again, give Brian Daboll and that coaching staff a lot of credit because they've kind of coached the turnovers out of him.
Yeah, look, I mean, these bottom 3, so to speak, I mean, I think are fairly interchangeable, and I thought about putting Brock at 7 too, but you know, just based on the only thing we've seen from him so far, I you know, and the talent around him, whether or not that's him being elevated or well, I would imagine the talent is elevating him, but you know, we haven't really seen too much that's going to make me pause and say, you know what, I trust him the least, or so to speak. So, all right, number 6 for me is Geno Smith. And again, this was a tough one because I think it's kind of almost a tale of two halves of the season for Geno. And it's not that he was bad in the second half. I just think he came down to earth a little bit more. I still think he's a really good quarterback, and I think he very sneakily could have a huge game against the 49ers if they're not prepared for it. But when we're talking about the top 7 or the top quarterbacks in the NFC playoffs right now, I can't put him over anyone else. I mean, again, I could have put him 7. I could have put him 5th. Like I said, these bottom 3 for me are fairly interchangeable. But I ended up going with Geno at 6.
I have Daniel Jones at 6. Ahead of Brock Purdy. And again, when you're talking about Geno Smith, Seattle was 6-3 and in contention for the division. And then since that point, they're 3-5 over the final 8 games. And they didn't look all that impressive against the Rams. I mean, they had everything to play for against the Rams. The Rams had nothing to play for with a coach that might be bailing on them, and they needed to go to overtime to beat the Rams. So I don't think Seattle's playing good football at all. And Geno Smith's kind of come back to earth the second half of the season, but I have Daniel Jones at number 6.
All right, number 5 for me, Brock Purdy. Again, you know, just based on solely what we've seen, you know, we haven't seen any negative. He's played very consistently, and again, I mean, it's we talked about it when Christian McCaffrey arrived in San Francisco that he was Jimmy G protection, and you know, not in the sense of, you know, pass blocking or run blocking. No, we're talking in terms of, well, let's maximize what we can do with maybe not a limited quarterback, but certainly one that has a ceiling lower than most elite quarterbacks. I guess that's the nicest way I can put it. And Brock Purdy's kind of the same thing. And that might be more so from inexperience. I mean, again, who knows? I mean, maybe he goes on to have the greatest career of all time. We don't know that. That once happened with 199th overall pick. So why not 262? But right now, I think a good spot for him is, you know, 5, 6. I landed with 5 with him.
Yeah, we agree in terms of 5, 6, 7, just in a different order. Yeah, those three guys are interchangeable. I've got Geno Smith at number 5 because I think in comparison with Daniel Jones and Brock Purdy, at his best, he's been a little better than those guys. So
yeah, I'd agree with that.
Maybe it was some sort of injury or a matchup or whatever the case may be. Maybe he comes to life. He's going to have a huge game on Saturday to even keep Seattle competitive against San Francisco. But Geno Smith, number 5 for me.
Yeah, it's like Seattle will win because of Geno Smith. The 49ers can win, and it won't necessarily be because of Brock Purdy. And that's not an insult to Brock Purdy. It's just the 49ers do so many things so well, and they're so dominant in so many other areas outside of the quarterback position. And again, that's not to say that he's not a competent quarterback. It's just there's a lot of unknown there, which gives you pause for concern because, I don't think anyone thinks that the 49ers aren't one of the 2 best teams in the NFC. But when it comes down to it, there's a couple quarterbacks. If you're going to sit there and say, who do you trust more in this matchup? You're going to pause when it comes to Brock Purdy. So number 4 for me, it's probably, based on how many turnovers he's going to have this weekend, but Dak Prescott. I am down as you can be on this guy who,
you like him too.
I do.
You're a guy.
You
like him actually more than I do. I remember last year you were like, "This is one of my 5 favorite quarterbacks in the league."
I thought, because I thought he didn't turn the ball over, and
exactly.
and I thought he was a far more balanced quarterback. And again, I mean, part of it is he missed time with injury. Maybe it's just a response to that, but when you throw 15 interceptions in 12 games, I just cannot excuse that away. You know what I mean? And not just 15 interceptions, because we spent a lot of time talking about turnover worthy plays, and is this real? No, I'm talking about 15 interception, and the majority of them, not only were they earned, but they were just bad. I'm talking you might see Aaron Rodgers throw one of those once in a lifetime type of interceptions, and he's been doing it weekly. So that's not to say that he doesn't have one of the highest ceilings of these quarterbacks remaining, but right now he is so much closer to that floor, and I just don't see him getting out of it. So I'll give him, obviously he has much more success than the other 3 that we just talked about, but that's about it. That's keeping him in this kind of upper echelon of these 7. So Dak is number 4 for me.
Yeah, I've got Kirk Cousins at number 4, and I think we've got 3 levels of quarterbacks in the NFC. We know who the 2 best ones are. Then there's this middle group with a couple of quarterbacks, and then 5, 6, and 7, as we said, are interchangeable. I've got Cousins at number 4. I've always considered him an underconfident overachiever, and I think I can see him turning the ball over in a huge situation against the Giants. I think the Giants can definitely beat Minnesota. But that's kind of the narrative with Dak Prescott as well. That's why they're both kind of in that middle group. They can both have outstanding games, right? But they can also have games where you just scratch your head and go, what are these guys thinking? And it's not like they don't have a lot of talent around them. Heck, Kirk Cousins is throwing arguably the best receiver in football in Justin Jefferson. And it's not like Dak Prescott doesn't have weapons. CeeDee Lamb is darn good. We've got a couple of productive backs, a good yet overrated offensive line, good play caller, and Kellen Moore. So they're in that group together. I'll just take Cousins at number 4 because I see a huge pick coming from him against the Giants. In fact, I think the Giants can beat them in that wild card matchup, which is almost like who deserves to even be in the playoffs, because these 2 teams are kind of overachieving teams this year. But hey, they made it and they're there. But I have Kirk Cousins at number 4.
Well, look, and I know sometimes it gets overstated a lot, but I think this Vikings team is something like 2-10, late window games. And that's not a coincidence. You know what I mean? That's it happens that often. It's not a coincidence. It's just happenstance. Oh, whatever, it happens. No, it's and I'm with you. I think that's as good of a sure bet as you can possibly imagine, as Kirk Cousins throwing an interception in this game. And I could, flip a coin. I ended up putting Dak 4th just because, again, the turnovers are just, I can't stop thinking about the turnovers. And when push comes to shove, I'll add that, I'll give that a little bit extra focus when it comes to looking at these quarterbacks. Is what's the most important thing? Playing smart football. And when you turn the ball over, that's not smart football. So yeah. So for me, I have Cousins at number 3, and for a lot of the reasons that you said, I'll echo through you, because again, I don't trust him yet in big situations. And again, we look at this Vikings team, and it's not just Kirk Cousins. Maybe, the Vikings are a microcosm, because they do have talent. You mentioned Justin Jefferson. They have Dalvin Cook in the backfield. They have a lot of other talent on this team, but somehow, despite being 13-4, they had a negative point differential this season. I don't know how
that
often.
Seems impossible, does it? Doesn't it almost seem impossible?
It does. I don't want to say it's never happened before, but I'm finding it hard to believe that many teams that go have won 13 games had a negative point differential. But we talked about it all season. They have 11 wins by 1 score this season. So when's the dam gonna burst on this Vikings team? And that's the question. And I think it might start with Kirk Cousins, because, you start turning the ball over, and it's going to be a very, very quick postseason for them. So number 2, or you gave number 3, right? No.
No, I need to 3, but number three to me is Dak Prescott, who I think, by the way, misses Amari Cooper. If you look at Dak Prescott's career numbers with and without Amari Cooper, he's like a totally different quarterback. Like, you traded him to Cleveland for a 6th-round pick.
I still don't understand that.
I mean, he's still a good receiver. He's not what you would call he's to me a really high-end number 2 receiver.
Yeah,
because he doesn't necessarily have the personality to be a number 1. I think he has the talent to be the 1, but he's kind of an unassuming, non-diva wide receiver. But he and CeeDee Lamb was a great combination. And I know we're going to preview the games tomorrow for this upcoming weekend. Don't you get a feeling that the Giants-Minnesota game is going to be the least talked about game, but has a chance to be the most entertaining game? Like, if you got two teams that are like in these close, kind of crazy games, like that is my leading contender to maybe be an overtime decision.
I can see that.
They're both pretty good and have some really good moments, but then they have some moments and you go, why aren't the Detroit Lions in the playoffs?
Yeah.
They're better than both of those teams, but I know we'll talk more about that tomorrow.
Yeah, and look, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you look at all, you already talked about the divisional rematches, the quarterback matchups, and that Minnesota Giants game has none of that. It's just a game. And to your point, it could end up being the most entertaining game on the entire slate, and we'll see. Mm-hmm. So, all right, number 2 for me, and folks, this is not who had the best statistical season this year, because this guy, again, I think was the front runner for MVP before he got injured, and I'm sure he's still going to get a vote or two in this whole grand scheme of things. But Jalen Hurts, and I think this Eagles team, we've seen the difference between him being there and him not. Again, I don't think it's a coincidence that they win 14 out of 15 with him under center, and they lose 2 when he's not, 2 of 2. And when you're talking about the NFC landscape of quarterbacks, there's not a lot of playoff experience here. So, outside of the number 1 guy who has enough playoff experience for all of these players' careers combined. But the point is, 2 through 7, you don't have much there. So it really comes down to, who do I trust more this season? And there's a big gap between Jalen Hurts and all of these other 6 guys. And again, I'm not including number 1, which I'm pretty sure you can figure out, because there's only 7 different players. Yeah. Who knows? But to me, Jalen Hurts, I mean, again, I'm big fan of how he plays the game. I think he's, I like smart football players. I like smart quarterbacks and guys that are very even keeled throughout the course of the game. And I think Jalen Hurts is one of those guys, and he produces. So number 2 for me is Jalen Hurts.
And leadership off the charts, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, he's got all that stuff maxed. Like, you could just tell his teammates love him. The coaching staff loves him. They follow him. That was a great draft choice, taking him in the 2nd round when you still had Carson Wentz there. And again, it kind of derailed them for one season because Wentz felt slighted. And at that point, I think the Eagles said, well, we bring in a quarterback and he feels slighted. It kind of tells you why Carson Wentz isn't the quarterback that we think he's going to be. Give Aaron Rodgers credit. They drafted a quarterback and he won back-to-back MVPs. He was kind of giving the middle finger to the front office. I went with Brady number 2. And look, I would not be shocked if the guy wins on Monday night and scares the hell out of everybody in the NFC and is somehow playing on Super Bowl Sunday. I would not be shocked. I just think that the offensive line, and again, there's some things that you have to throw in there because the quarterback does need help at some point. That offensive line is really scary. And I think that could be the difference if Tampa even makes it to the NFC Championship game or whatever. If they play Philadelphia, is that Hurts has a really good offensive line. So I have Brady at number 2, but like I said, I would not be shocked if he's playing on Super Bowl Sunday because why would you bet against that guy?
Well, and that's really that. I mean, that's a big part of it. The Bucs offensive line has been playing better the last few weeks. They have, and I've been one of their biggest critics. And like I said, I mean, every team deals with injuries, so it's not the biggest reason why they went 8-9. I think those issues got magnified because of bad situational coaching and game planning earlier in the season. So you're taking a disadvantage. You're having an offensive line that's banged up, has a bunch of backups in it, and then you're making your offense very predictable, basically handcuffing them even more because the other team essentially has a pretty good idea of what you're doing. So it's a lot easier to play defense that way. The last few weeks I'm excluding a majority of the Falcons game because, well, the starters really only played about a quarter or so. But over that time, and you include the week before the win over the Carolina, and you have some pretty good football, and there is potential that you're going to get a little bit of boost with Ryan Jensen in there. So, but aside from all that, it's Tom Brady. I mentioned the guy has enough playoff experience to last a lifetime for all these quarterbacks. And, I don't think it's just about experience because at the end of the day, the guy's still producing at a high level. And I'm not talking about raw numbers. I'm talking about ability to throw and all those things. Just like we saw in 2019, there wasn't a physical decline. It was, circumstances maybe not in his control led to maybe a more down statistical season. But as we know, John, I mean, stats don't dictate how good you are. I mean, that they help, I'm sure, but I don't care if you throw 25 touchdowns, 30 touchdowns. It's about your ability on the field, and he clearly shows that he still has that ability. So at the end of the day, it's like, the NFC might be easy, but you're going to be hard pressed to find a quarterback deep down you trust more than Tom Brady in any playoff situation. And for now, 8-9 doesn't matter. It's all about winning the next 4 games for many of these teams.
He has 35 career playoff wins. The other 6 quarterbacks from the NFC in the playoffs have a grand total of 2. Kirk Cousins has 1. He beat New Orleans in overtime a few years ago, and Dak Prescott beat Seattle 4 years ago in a playoff game. That's it. Yeah. Two playoff wins from 6 quarterbacks, 35 from 1. Look, an 8-9 team, you're right. It means nothing. They've got a home game against Dallas. Dallas has a tendency of pooping their pants. And if he wins that one, then gain some momentum. I'm sure the rest of the NFC is kind of pointing at him. Look, 2 years ago, I felt really strong that the Green Bay Packers was the best team in football. And I think the numbers bear it out, and they were hosting an NFC Championship game. And I remember watching Tampa play Washington in the wild card round. He beat them. Then I saw them play New Orleans in the divisional round, and he beat them. And I'm like, oh, okay, that guy's going to show up to Lambeau Field with a spot in the Super Bowl. It scared the hell out of me, and we saw what happened. He played a great game, but he won. And then he went out and won the Super Bowl MVP 2 weeks later. So, yeah, no, he's the guy. He's literally the elephant in the room when we're talking about the NFC. Ranking these quarterbacks wasn't easy because we're ranking, it's like, well, this guy's not all that good. This guy's not all that good. This guy's not all that good. But we know what he can do. Yeah, and look, and Braden brings it up in the chat, and, for as much talk as of Brady having a down season, had he played that whole game against Atlanta, you're talking about a guy who's at 45 is going to probably throw 48, high 4,800, maybe 4,900 yards. And depending on, he just needed 300 and I think 80 to hit 5,000. And as Braden brings up in the chat, it's like, think about a couple of, go to that first Carolina game and, a few of those huge drops. The Buccaneers were league leaders in drops again this year, which isn't surprising because that's been consistent over the last 3 years, or at least I know as long as Brady's been there, I know it's been that way. And I think I think Green Bay was top 5 as well. There were 3 on Sunday night. Not that he played great. Not that he played great, but No, but that's a huge difference though from just a year ago. If you want to talk about one of the big things last year, that Green Bay was at the bottom of the league. Like I said, the difference in drops from Green Bay to Tampa was enough to lead the league in drops.
You know what I mean? It was like 20,
Yeah, I see what you're
20
saying,
drops difference. And I think the Bucks led the league this year with 30 or 31. So just a marginal, just a couple of those, especially even that one deep pass for that touchdown that, that's a walk-in touchdown. You're talking about a guy at 45 who's easily passing 5,000 yards and could very well rival Mahomes' lead this year. And look, Tom Brady last year threw more yards and produced technically more touchdowns than Mahomes did this year. So he's still at that level. And again, people got fooled in 2019 with the statistical decline, so to speak. And I think people might be getting fooled again. If I was doing my job right, I'd have a soundbite queued up and we'd go off into the sunset with that. But I do not. So I'm just going to have to say that's going to do it for us here today. As you mentioned, though, tomorrow, we're going to really dive into these games and obviously make our picks and selections. So you still got some time to figure out who you're going to pick, John. I know it might be tough with some of these games, but that should be fun tomorrow. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And be sure to tune in again tomorrow and follow us on Twitter at FPC Radio Live. And, of course, head over to fullpresscoverage.com and check out all the latest and greatest there. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will talk to you tomorrow.